off times at 1 o'clock.
You got a couple minutes.
What time are you guys going down?
There you go. Rob.
We sat through all that fender.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. I think I'm not
This
sure.
guy's not really cutting me a deal. He's giving me the same price.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not.
All right, cool. Yeah, it just
You know that.
just showed you walking and kind of.
Yo, droopy, man.
So now 2 minutes from now, it's going to show you walking.
Nah. No. Walk the dog and do all that stuff.
All right, so that's that.
Maybe, I guess maybe I will do the whole thing and just show up. 12 to 6.
That's between you and the wall.
I am not saying that like I did last time. He did that to me one time too on that cable games. Oh, you got me up here at this time. Man, I sat there for like 4 hours.
He hasn't practiced anywhere near as much as
I'm like, the only one. The only one at the table.
he's coming off with the, I can't hear myself. You sit there. You know what you're saying. You can hear everybody else. As long as you can hear everybody else. Do I need to be concerned about the person?
No. No, you do your presentation normal, and then because it's just encoded, whatever that's recording, it's just
But yeah, I'm starting to see.
like they're not going to.
I went to the beginning like really like them.
It's not like a delay, like some people separate. They have no idea. They are.
I've had that one a couple times where he wanted to book a gig because he wants to play every day weekend. I'm like, that's not beneficial. It doesn't make any sense. People get tired of your shit. If you're not learning new stuff to put you to do, and we're at that point where we had a couple of tankers because we were to go.
Yeah, so now it's just showing me what I just said to you.
So, you know,
And that doesn't matter. That's not gonna.
or he wanted to book a show or something. I don't know. Can we get another job? You want somebody to get another job? Give it away.
I didn't see your face. Back was to me.
Wow, look at them spiffy shoes. What are you pretending to be Dave? Dave.
There might be another one in August
Spiffy shoes.
if I go away.
The jeans and the shirt on too. You're pretending to be
Smoke a cigarette, have a heart attack.
Man, well, thanks. Man,
We got like 2.
Oh, okay.
you can suck one down in 2 minutes.
Yeah, up and down too.
Just remember, this is picking up everything you all say.
Wow.
If anybody has not
You're the one that
registered,
won the live stream, not me.
please go to the registration table.
I thought Sanford registered all of us.
Still got to sign in. If you have not signed in, please go to the sign-in table.
You guys drive you nuts, huh? Casey brought this book to turn gray already. What's that about?
Oh,
Went that way with the left.
Rob. We got to plug in his clicker to advance him. Hold on. PowerPoint. Same. No, that's what I need to do. Give me a sec. That's what I was saying.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for working through us, the bugs with us. Welcome everybody in York and Ivyland. First up, we have Mark Sexton from NERBY. He's their senior, he told me, I wrote it down, I knew it. Their VP of Engineering, and he's been working with the Freedom Region. Can you turn it down, please?
I can't. It's not coming from me.
Hey, shut up.
I can't. It's not coming.
No, it's replaying it.
Can't mute it?
Don't worry, that's not annoying at all.
Mute. Oh, they're on mute. Hold on a minute.
Just say my name.
Here, hold on.
Hold on. We're getting it from mute.
Still have bugs.
Well, it's only muting your side, it's only your side.
Rob, stop. Hold on, Rob, stop.
Can you turn
Now.
But they still hearing us, though.
Yes,
Okay. All right,
they should be.
try it again.
Ask him.
And I should be able to remember VP of Engineering. Mark Sexton from NERBY is going to start us off. He's the VP of Engineering. He's been working with the Freedom Region since 2015. Mark, why don't you take it away? Sure.
Hold on. Hold on.
We good?
Good. Do your thing.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Sexton. I work for a company called Ping. We've been in use at Comcast since 2013 in various stages. Comcast Freedom Region reached out to us in February or March of 2015. Looking for a safety solution, and we worked with the IT department and the Monica Alston, your safety director, and the business intelligence group, and we work closely with them on a regular basis. The product has come a long way since 2015, and it really reflects input from Comcast and other companies, field technicians. So we like to say it's by the field, for the field. Unfortunately, this is a salesy presentation, but I'll run through it pretty quickly, and we'll get to a demo. Does everyone here have NERBY on their phone? Yeah? Excellent. Do you update it regularly? No, it doesn't update automatically, unfortunately. I don't think it does, at least. We have no insight into your Comcast App Store configuration, but I don't think it updates automatically, so you should definitely visit your App Store, app catalog, and update it frequently. For those in Keystone, we're hoping to be working with you guys shortly. So this will be more of a preview of things to come for the folks out in Keystone. But yeah, so we've started working initially with Comcast for field safety, and it was limited to basically electrical safety hazards for many years. And recently we started working with Comcast to mark plant maintenance issues. We interface to your RTC tool, refer to construction tool, and then recently the Business Intelligence Group released a new tool called CRT, Construction Repair Tracker, I think. And NERBY is the primary interface into that, into inputting data for that. So we'll just run through this quickly. See if we can get the clicker to work here. There seems to be a distance limitation on the clicker. There we go. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So we work with a number of companies, primarily in cable companies, a couple of of electric companies as well. The first electric company we worked with is a company called National Grid out in Massachusetts. They're one of the two main electrical companies out there. Here's some of the wonderful things that have been said. Some of those quotes are from Comcast people. Yeah, everyone who uses the tool likes it. We modeled it after the Waze navigation app as far as, when you're using Waze to navigate someplace, if you see something, you can drop a pin, whether it's police up ahead or roadkill or vehicle on the shoulder. And that's kind of what drove us for the NERBY application as well. Of course, your icons and the hazards that you place, the information that you place on the map are all configurable, so we work with your leadership to come up with the Comcast sanctioned icons and names for these things, and they integrate to your back-end systems like CRT and Watchtower for some of the safety issues. I'd say the clicker's not working too well.
Looks like that might have been done.
All right, so here's some of the companies that we're deployed with and actively in trial with. Like I said, most of them are cable companies. We are working as well with National Grid and a couple other electric companies. We'll work through it. So, what we strive for at our company is to try to make your teams the most productive teams that they can be. And the one overriding thing that drives us is sharing information where the information is important. So you don't care about a smart pin, an electrical hazard that might be affecting 100 Main Street, Philadelphia, if you're sitting in this building, right? You only care about it when you're near that area. So all the information is associated with the smart pin, and it's all at a location, and we try to make it important to where you are when you are there. We are.
See now, at that time it worked.
Yeah.
Just point it at me and I'll click it for you.
So NERBY is a cloud-based software as a service platform. We automate the information flow. So like I said, we integrate with Comcast backend systems through our API into your Watchtower and CRT systems. We like to think it's pretty intuitive and easy to use. Doesn't take a lot of your time, doesn't add a lot of overhead. It is a mobile app and a dashboard. I don't think anyone here would probably ever see the dashboard part of it. But the mobile app is, we constantly update it. We deliver new features on a regular basis. So please do check your Comcast app catalog and make sure you're up to date. We're actually trying to get a version we released a few weeks back up on the app catalog. Getting that process working with your IT team has been challenging, but we'll get there. So like I said, everything we do is at a location, and we call that pin on the map, a smart pin. When you drop a smart pin, the app has the ability to collect information through a form we call a smart form. Some customers use this feature where they can look at the historical values of the smart forms over time. Comcast doesn't use that, but other companies do. And then we also have the ability to set timers on certain smart pins. And we're just in the process of starting a trial with a region out in California to cover solo worker use case. So if you're up in a bucket or in an attic or in a crawl space and you want someone to check on you in half an hour, make sure you're still there, everything's okay, we can set a timer and do that. And your phone will ping when the timer expires and says, hey, it's time for you to check in. And then if you don't check in a few minutes, whatever the configured time happens to be, we'll change it again, and there'll be a dashboard notification, and back office systems will get notified that you haven't checked in, and someone can, institute whatever the Comcast process is to come check on you, have your soup call you, or whatever your process is. So yeah, we create these smart forms. They're customized. They're completely data driven and customized to each smart pin and each company that we work with. The idea is to replace or eliminate paperwork. National Grid, the electric company in Massachusetts, they used to fill out a blue piece of paper whenever there was a downed electrical wire, and it was all to track police overtime, mandated by the state. And it was literally a blue piece of paper until they started using NERBI, and then they've completely replaced that blue piece of paper with actual on-premise data, and we detect when the technician gets there and when he leaves, and they use that information to produce a far more accurate report for the state. Like I said, we do have the ability to look at historical snapshots of data that have been collected through the app. Comcast doesn't use that today, but this is basically a timeline of a smart pin and all the different changes that the smart pin has gone through. And as you click on each of these different smart pin history states, you'll see the historical information associated with the smart form values there. We have customers who love that. They used to track all that information in one big Google sheet. Have the technicians copy it down on paper and then input it into a Google spreadsheet through Google Forms, and they've completely replaced that process by using NERBI and this feature. Like I said, we do have the ability to do timers. The timers can be as short as a minute. They can be as long as days, months. And we are in the process of setting up that trial with the region in California to start the solo worker trial. We have the ability, if you place a smart pin on the map, we have the ability for you to watch it. So if you want to know when it's resolved or when someone else enters data into it, you can watch the smart pin and receive in-app notifications whenever it changes. So if you place a loss of neutral and you want to know when it's resolved, so you can go back and fix this customer's cable after the electrical issue has been resolved, you can do that. You place the loss of neutral, you watch it, and then when it's removed from the map, you'll get notified within the app that's been resolved, and you can then go return and do your job now that the electrical issue has been resolved. It's all done through in-app messaging, and the messages can also be seen on the dashboard as well. So primarily within Comcast, NERBI is being used for safety. Coming up a quick second is the plant maintenance usage in the past couple months. Now that the CRT tool is mandating NERBI as the front end. The usage has gone through the roof on the plant maintenance side of the house. Solo worker, again, you guys will be trialing that soon. That's also in use in a couple other customers. We have the storm recovery is a big one, and we're actually trying to get a trial going with the Freedom Region and Buckley Communications, one of your contractors or business partners, where when Comcast enters storm mode, they'll enable the NERBI customer for Buckley, and then Buckley will have a set of smart pins, and they can use their employees to drive around and mark, broken tree, broken pole, wire down, whatever the situation is. So they'll use the mobile app to mark all that information in storm mode, and then I assume subsequently they'll be part of the repair effort as well. And we do site surveys. So a booming part of our business with other customers is tracking fixed assets like nodes and using the timers to make sure that regular maintenance is done on nodes. We have a customer who uses us to make sure a node's been touched every 6 months. So if someone doesn't go in as part of some other piece of work to balance the node, in 6 months the timer will go off and they'll assign that work to someone else to go in and touch that node. We have the ability to track assets within a node. Generator refueling is a popular use case, so you can set up put a smart pin where a generator is, and then put a timer on it for a 2, 4, 6 hour refuel, and then make sure that someone's on that refueling case. So I'm going to run into a demo here. So we're going to switch the HDMI cable. This ought to be fun. It worked before. Flawlessly. So all right. Camera ready? Yeah, go for it. Okay. So what you're seeing is this iPhone device in my hand that's being mirrored to the screen of my Mac here. You can see as I zoom out, the blue dot indicates where we are, south of Philly here. If I zoom in, straighten it back up a little bit. The blue dot is located on this particular building. Those of you who are familiar with NERBY, you know that all you have to do to place a smart pin is to tap the plus sign in the lower left corner, which is almost invisible on the screen. Can I resize that? Can't seem to resize that. But they're down here in the lower left corner. That's the top of the blue circle. That's the plus sign. If you just tap the plus sign, you get a menu of categories for smart pins. And this is all configurable. I configured this up for a Comcast demo we did a week or so ago. So if I tap the field safety category, these are the 7 smart pins that are in use at Comcast today. It's a little bit hard to see the colors, but the first 2 are live wire and broken primary bracket. Those are red. Those are SEV1s. In Comcast configuration, the gas odor is actually also red and SEV1. When those are created on the map, those are immediately synchronized to Watchtower. A ticket is created for those. The XOC monitors those until they're completed. When they're completed, the Watchtower ticket gets resolved, and the smart pin is removed from the NERBY app. And that's all that back office integration that I was mentioning. Low open secondary, primary below neutral. Those are SEV2s. Those get a weekly report emailed to your supervisors, I believe. And unsafe pole is a SEV3 and gets emailed weekly to construction, I believe. So that's how it works. So if I were to tap on the live wire smart pin, the first 3 items on the smart form should be familiar to you if you've ever placed one or looked at one. We're looking for the pole owner, the pole number, and did you call 911? Those are, I think, configured in Comcast today. We provide, the little asterisk means that it's required information here at the end of every line. So it's required information. We provide default values for the pole number and pole owner because it's not always available information, and it's not always the easiest thing to do if you're outside and it's 4 degrees and you're trying to type on your iPhone screen. It's not always the easiest thing to get done, but we do require you to enter information for the did you call 911. So you tap that cell, you get the standard iPhone chooser, maybe, you don't know, yes, no, but we're good Comcast employees. Of course, we called 911. After that's been filled in, all you need to do is hit the create button up on the upper right. We get a post create message and the start of an enter event that was cut off by the audio here. So the enter event means that you're within that geofence. There's a 150-meter geofence around that smart pin. And the post create message was a feature we added after we did the smart forms. It says, after you create this kind of smart pin, show this kind of message to the user. So there's our smart pin on the map at our current location. It's always placed at your current location. You can move it if you want to do that later. If you tap on it, you see the information. You can add text notes if you wanted to do that. If you wanted to type in, wire across road, and hit the blue up arrow to submit that. That information is submitted to the cloud, and that becomes available to anyone who looks at the smart pin and the dashboard, so it's a good way to keep track of notes. You can also submit a picture there if you wanted to attach a photo. You can't see it on the screen, but at the bottom of the screen there's a text entry box and then the standard iPhone camera and gallery photos. So if you wanted to tap the gallery, look through your gallery, attach a photo of the situation that you took, and upload it. We'll tell you that the attachment's been uploaded. It takes a couple seconds for us to produce the thumbnail and then get it back to the phone. But now that the thumbnail's been created, that's in line with the text message that you put there, the note that you put there, and it's a thumbnail. But if you tap the thumbnail, you can get a full resolution image pop up, and you should always delete that full resolution image, otherwise it takes up space on your phone. But if you wanted to watch this situation, perhaps this wire was blocking you from getting to someplace you needed to be. If you tap that star in the upper right-hand corner of the details page there, it goes to a solid yellow right up here. And that means you're watching that. Now, if any other user modifies that smart pin, you'll get an in-app notification, an in-app message that tells you that that it's been modified. And when it's done, it'll be deleted, or you can delete it yourself just by going to the ... up there and choosing the trash can, and then deleting the smart pin. So I mentioned we do plant maintenance as well. So if I tap the plant maintenance icon, you currently are configured with aerial, underground, and MDU options. So if you were to tap the aerial, and maybe you wanted to denote that you need to replace a cable at this location, again, you get pole number, pole owner. I don't know if these are the exact Comcast configuration for a smart form, but I know you do ask for estimated footage. So if you need 50 feet of cable to replace there, you create the smart pin. Again, it's on the map. This smart pin does not have a geofence around it. It's 0 meters. So it's just an informational smart pin. You don't get that enter event because you don't want to be driving through Philadelphia and have a million different enter events as you drive by. But it does, again, it denotes it on the map. If there were a lot of smart pins around, as you zoomed out, those smart pins would cluster, so the map wasn't too cluttered. Tap on the smart pin at any point in time and you get the details for that. And again, we can watch it, add notes. You can see the attributes. If you tap on the attributes tab, you can see that, the information that you entered for that. And if you happen to upload any photos, in addition to seeing the thumbnail and the notes, you can also see the attachment there. And the nice thing about that is if you were to upload a PDF of, say, equipment documentation, you could actually, we don't produce a thumbnail for the equipment documentation in the notes, but if you go to the attachment, you can actually view the PDF for the equipment documentation right there online. So that's being used by a couple of different customers in some places. So we'll clean that smart pin up also. And so we put this demo together for your safety team. We worked with David Newman when he was the Northeast Division Safety Director, and I guess now he's taken Heidi Kelly's spot, and he's the National VP of Safety, or I don't know, whatever you guys call your corporate safety person. So he had asked us to put together a situational safety demo. So we just threw together some smart pins. So if you're, and these probably aren't going to be the exact smart pins that get used, but we are looking for a national rollout. But if you ever wanted to share information with your techs and say, hey, this is what I ran into here, the next guy's probably going to run into it too. I just wanted him to be aware. There was a very interesting article written by a 10-year cable technician that's, I guess, gained a lot of attention inside Comcast. Maybe some of you guys have seen that article floating around. It was written by a lady who was a fulfillment technician for 10 years. I don't know if she worked with Comcast or some other company, but it's garnered a lot of attention, some of the situations she was in. So if you ever come into run across a situation where you're going by a house, or you need to go into a house and there's a dog there that you think is dangerous, just drop the pin. It'll put that information on the map. Someone else will be able to see that the next time they get there. We've also heard horror stories of people running into customers answering the door with guns. So there's privacy concerns. So what's being discussed now is a pin that said I had to excuse myself, which I guess is the buzzword you guys are supposed to use if you ever need to excuse yourself from a dangerous situation. So that might end up being what's used here, or maybe you just have a generic dangerous area. This dangerous area is actually timed, so when you tap it, it has a time of completion. But I'm going to actually demo that in another. I'm going to go to the lone worker here, and if you're down in a manhole and you want to make sure someone checks on you, all you have to do is tap the manhole thing, and you see there's a time of completion attribute here, which means that this is a timed smart pin. You create it. You see you get the create message on the phone. The smart pin is placed. Now what happens here is, because this is a timed smart pin, the server, when the server creates that smart pin and stores it, the server sets up a timer for that smart pin. And in this case, it's configured for 1 minute. And in 1 minute, it's going to change to a time to check in smart pin. And that's going to have a geofence around it. So it's going to go from a no geofence to 150 meter geofence, which is the iOS minimum geofence. And you're going to get an enter event on this phone. So you're going to hear it go off, or you start to hear it, because whenever we connect external sound, you hear only the beginning of the ping sound. But you'll hear the beginning of a ping sound, and you'll see the icon change, and that's your key. That's your cue to know that it's time to check in. So you got the whole ping that time. So automatically the server changed that smart pin to a time to check in. And again, it's 150 meters around that particular smart pin, so it's a relatively small geofence, and it's time for you to check in. So maybe your process is to delete this smart pin. You're out of the manhole. You delete the smart pin. You're fine. And the integration we're doing with California, they have the West Division has what they call an SOC, which is a Safety Operations Center. I'm not sure if the Freedom Region has that or not. We've never worked with them. But the SOC would be monitoring this, and they would detect that the that the smart pin, the check-in smart pin was removed. If it's not removed, there's another 1-minute timer on this one that's going to change this to an SOS smart pin, and we're going to blow up the geofence really big to 1,500 meters, and everyone within a mile radius of this smart pin is going to get an enter event and know that someone at that location needs help. So maybe it's your process that nearby technicians should drop what they're doing and go figure out if this guy's okay, or at least pick up the phone and call him, or maybe it's all the SOC's process. We're not trying to dictate your process. We're just trying to give you the tools to help out. So those 2 minutes are pretty much the longest 2 minutes of any demo that I give. You're always waiting, hoping that it comes through. That one worked pretty well. That's it for the demo. Did anybody have any questions here? All right, so we're going to switch back to the presentation. Now I'm asking for huge amounts. Starting with my coordination to plug in the HDMI cable. All right. So like I said, plant maintenance is another huge use here at Comcast. You guys create about a safety smart pin a day throughout the Freedom region. We had something like, actually I have the numbers here. We had something like, well, I don't have the numbers here. I do have the numbers here. So the Freedom Region smart pin in January, February, and March and April and May actually was about 30 to 40 safety smart pins. So it's about one a day. For plant maintenance, in April you created over 1,100 plant maintenance smart pins. And in May, you were over 1,200 plant maintenance smart pins. So the plant maintenance smart pin usage has really exploded in the last couple of days. And we are the only interface, only mobile interface into CRT. Another popular use case at customers is temporary drops. So you guys know that there are times, especially in the middle of winter, where you just string the cable across the ground, and somebody else, the construction team, is supposed to come back and bury it in the spring when the ground thaws, and inevitably some of those get lost track of, and the cable's there across the ground until your customer complains that he can't mow his lawn. We were actually in a meeting with Tony Speller, the Northeast VP of Operations, I think. And the day before, he had gotten a call from someone in a wheelchair who had gotten tangled up on a temp drop and tumbled out of their wheelchair. Yeah, kind of hard to imagine, but that's the things, that was top of his mind the day we met with him. So we actually built this feature for the Northeast Division, but it's in use at a lot of other places, where when you place the smart pin, we can actually require you to add a photo. And if we require one, you can actually add multiple. So if you wanted to, add, photos of the entire path that needs to be dug up and buried, at some customers, that's literally 10 photos per smart pin. But we can require you to add a photo, and it can have a label on it. Take a picture from the curb to the house, and then take a picture from the house to the curb, and that's what'll show up in the smart pin, both on the mobile app and in the dashboard. And again, that's a lot of customers have found that to be pretty useful. It helps them keep track of these situations that they were losing track of before. I mentioned briefly fixed asset management. So we are in use at some customers where they do routine maintenance, scheduled routine maintenance, where they use the timer feature. They can keep track of the historic values every time they touch them. And they find this to be useful. They can use our reporting tool to create reports and spit out CSV files, buy certain types of smart pins. So if you have a node smart pin and you just want the node and not all the safety and plant maintenance ones, you just filter by the node smart pin and spit out the report for that. And that's all on the dashboard, but so you guys would never really see that. But it is being heavily used by some customers. Again, here's some really nice things that have been said by us, some of them by Comcast people, some of them by others. So the first statement up there actually comes from Monica Alston, your Director of Safety here in the Freedom Region. And she has been a big proponent of NERBY since day one, and her whole mindset is to change the culture around safety here. So you guys are crowdsourcing safety issues, just like Waze drivers are crowdsourcing traffic issues, right? And you're helping yourself by informing yourselves. She's a big proponent of it. Again, it's simple to use. We integrate with your back office systems, and we don't require any equipment. We're a SaaS-based cloud solution. All right, that's all I got. Any questions? Basking in the glory of the applause. Any questions? No? All right. To everyone out in Keystone region, thank you for your attention, and in the room here, thank you for your attention as well.
I'm just going to wait just a second. Do you have any questions from Ivy Land?
Okay.
They are in a little bit of a delay. But nobody has any questions in the room?
So submit a problem. No, it's not on us, but submit a problem report through the app, and I forward that to the right people in Comcast, and they all of a sudden they become very responsive to you. I'm happy to do it for you guys. So those are the plant maintenance emails. Yeah. So the weird thing about your configuration here in Freedom is, as you place the plant maintenance smart pins, they get integrated into the CRT tool. And then they have a 7-day time to live in NERBY. So they automatically disappear from NERBY in 7 days without any update from you guys whatsoever. So you can't really use us to figure out what happened to it. You have to rely on the emails. And the emails, I guess, have a link into some system. Yeah, we've had a number of complaints about that. Yeah,
it did work the first couple times I used it. I got the email. And then all of a sudden it stopped.
Yeah, so one problem that they were having was when you sign into NERBY, we ask for your email, and we only do that once, and we never validated it. So if you had an extra space in there in the middle, or a dash, or typoed it in some way, shape, or form, that was never picked up. But if it worked once, you obviously got it right. But some people had it never worked for because they had it typoed. So we just the app that we have in the Apple App Store that we're trying to get Comcast to upgrade the app catalog with actually validates your email address by sending you a 5-digit code, right? So you can't actually finish installing until you get the 5-digit code and enter it. If you've already installed, you'll never see that, so you should probably reinstall just to make sure you retype your email address correctly if there's any question about that. But again, if you've already installed, you won't see that. But new installs, you'll have to type in that 5-digit code that we email to you so that, at your Comcast, your cable.comcast.com or comcast.com email address. So yeah, so we do have that. But again, if it used to work and it didn't, just go into the app, submit a problem report, and I send it to Rich Sullivan and say, hey, Rich, You know, you guys aren't doing your job here.
Yeah, I got an email from Rich. He said the email was sent out. I was like, no, it wasn't. Well, that's fine.
We do have a question.
Sure.
If you could repeat the question so it picks up on your mic. Is this cross-functional between companies, i.e. Pico had down wires and they're working on the area, or is there any plan for that?
Okay, so the question is NERBY cross-functional between power companies like Pico? And the answer is it can be if the other company is interested. So I mentioned before we're trying to get to the point where we can start a trial with the Freedom Region and a business partner called Buckley Construction or Buckley Cable Communications or Buckley something. It's one. What's that? We know Buckley. You guys know Buckley. We've had a couple of demos with them. We've built a few features for you guys where Comcast can say, here's the storm mode smart pins I want Buckley to have, and when Comcast enters storm mode, they can turn on Buckley, basically, you know, through our app and say, hey, you know, now go out and use NERBY to place these smart pins, and then subsequently there's a process to fix it. So we could do the same thing with a Pico. Say if there were a live wire and we had a Pico customer and a Comcast customer, and one or the other placed the live wire, we could set it up so they could both see it. So far, other than National Grid, the electric and their live wire process up there for reporting to the state, power companies are very reluctant to share that information outside of the power company.
So they don't share that with the cable company
Yeah,
up there?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and they don't want to work with us to help share that information, right? So again, we work with National Grid, but that information is completely internal to their company. It was really a reporting issue, right? I mean, they had a blue sheet of paper. They called it the blue sheet, and you know the electricians were supposed to fill it out when they got to the live wire, what time they got, what ETA they provided, what time they got there, what time they left, what time the next guy got there, and then they compiled this whole report, and everyone knew they were just making up the information at the end of the day before they went in to see their supervisor. So they basically replaced us, and they get the times from the geofence enter and exit events, and you know, automatically collected the other stuff through the app and automate that report. So, but that's the only electric company we work with, and it's a very limited use case. But we have this ability to share smart pins and between customers. We're just looking for the right opportunity. It would be nice.
All right, we will take a quick 10-minute break. Continue then.
All right, I'll be around for the other presentations, and I'll be back again at 1. So if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free.
again. Do you guys want to come on over and sit down? Back on it? Back on. All right, Kevin Matthews, he's a senior engineer for Energy Test LLC, which is a subsidiary for Triam. He is responsible for all of Triam's power engineering, including the high voltage. He was also a field engineer and a senior field engineer for General Electric Industrial Solutions, and he's a registered professional engineer in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. So he's going to talk to us about high voltage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For what you do, I mean, I've been in the service industry my entire career, and I know that poor planning on other people's parts does constitute an automatic emergency on yours. So I've tried to regulate it by policy to say that all emergencies require 24-hour notice, but I haven't been successful. So thank you for what you do. All right, let's see if we can. There we go. Okay, today we're going to be talking about working around power lines, recognizing hazards, a little bit about grounding and bonding, and approach distances. So when you're working on power lines or around power lines, obviously it creates some unique safety hazards for you guys, and those hazards can include injuries, fatalities, and electrocution. So how do we recognize hazards? Is it possible to work safely around down power lines? And what can we do to determine if it's safe? This picture, a friend of my wife's actually posted on Facebook. She was one of the first ones on the scene. She posted on Facebook about this truck, and there was down power lines on it. She called 911 and how scary it was. And when I look at it, all I see is telecommunication lines. So, but she did the right thing. She called 911 and told the truck driver to stay in the truck and all that stuff. So you need to be able to recognize the hazards. So why is this training important? Because at the end of the day, we all want to go home, okay? Whether it's to the dog, to the wife, to the girlfriend, to your Mustang, whatever it is, we want to go home. I had a professor at college who used to say, it's easy when you know how. And to a large point, that is. So we're going to start with a little bit of general information. We're going to talk about what risks we're exposed to, what resources you have available, where you can get more information, what's going to keep you safe, and some tools and PPE that you want to work with. Okay, low voltage is less than 600 volts. So in the U.S., that's your 480, 240 on down. Medium voltage is from 601 volts, obviously, up to about 69 kV, and it includes delta NY systems, so you can get some, like I said, 12470, 7200, and some other unique values. That's probably the limit of what you guys should be exposed to, but obviously 69 kV and on down is still pretty dangerous. And then there's high voltage up to 230, and goes all the way up to ultra high at 1.1 million. So what standards apply? Obviously OSHA, part 1926, and then for construction and general industry 1910. So the telecommunication standard is 1910-268. So hopefully you're familiar with that. 1926-1410 is the power line safety for all voltages. And then 1408 is power line safety up to 350 kV. And then the National Electric Safety Code, which the most current version is the 2017 version. So it's up to your employer to provide the tools, training procedures, and practices, and that's why we're here. So we'll talk a little bit about what's on a pole, okay? Utility poles can range from 20 up to 100 feet. Standard pole is about 35 feet. Poles are buried to 10% of the pole length plus 2 feet, so it's roughly about 6 feet for most of the poles you come across. They usually last about 30 or 40 years, and they're supposed to be inspected. They can do that by sounding, wristograph drilling, coring inspections that will tell utilities how much life is left in the pole when they need to be replaced. Unfortunately, less than half of the poles that need to be replaced are actually replaced when they should be. So when you're out there, you've got to look to see what you're up against, and you need to make the decision. You're going to be the most important person in keeping yourself safe. Attachment, weight, moisture contact, vibration, settling, vegetation, wildlife, wind, soil, weather conditions, all have an effect on the pole. Utility poles can also be concrete, steel, or a fiberglass composite. So poles, okay, so you can have a simple utility pole or a more complex one that actually has transformers, reclosers, switches on it, or it can be a joint use pole. Joint use poles, obviously you're sharing multiple utilities. So that's where your telecommunication is going to be, that's where your CATV is going to be. It's also could be communication wires on there. There may be traffic signals, street lights, decorations. You know, when you go to different towns, they have Christmas decorations, holiday decorations. They may also have, you know, veterans they're honoring or something else. Fire alarm wiring. Utility poles are divided into 3 spaces, or 3 zones, from the top on down. The top zone is going to be the supply space, then the safety or neutral space, and then your communication space is at the bottom. So you can see in the picture here, the supply space is up at the top, and then there's a kind of an open area, which is the neutral space, and then your area. So most important thing to note is that specified by the National Electrical Safety Code, there's supposed to be a minimum of 30 inches and from the bottom of the line, the transformer, or at midspan to the to your lines or the communication space, and 40 inches at the pole. How often do you actually see that? Probably not very often. Ideally it is on newer installations you'll see it, but there's a lot of cases where you're not going to have as much clearance as the code says you should have for various reasons. Communication space, obviously, you know a great deal about that. Lines may be shielded and supported by a steel strand, and all metallic surfaces must be bonded together and to the multi-ground neutral. Okay, so on some poles you'll see at the very topmost wire is a static wire. That's there for lightning protection. Usually in areas where there's a lot of lightning activity, you'll see them, but it's not always there. If it is there, that's supposed to be tied to the grounding conductor that runs down to the base of the pole and is grounded. Then you've got your transmission lines, your primary, and then your distribution area, your secondary service, you drop to the load, and then that 30-inch zone to keep you safe. Now, when I talk about grounding, I'm going to try to reserve that term for connected to the earth. Okay, when I talk about bonding, I'm going to say tied together. So everything is tied together so that it's at the same potential, quote unquote. Okay, you can get a general idea of how high the voltage is by looking at the insulator. The bigger the insulator, the higher the voltage. If you look at a single phase service, you usually see a single small insulator. You drive by a substation and you see insulators that are, you know, the same length as I am tall. That's very high voltage. Oh, that's a good one. Okay. Well, I'm not going to be able to, let's see if I can. I can't lighten that up. All right. No, that's not going to. You know, originally I had these white, and I changed them to black to make them easier to see. Okay. Oh. All right. Insulators are the insulating supports that attach the power lines to the pole or to some other device. They support the weight of the suspended wires. If it's insulated, it's separated from another conductor, and that can be by a dielectric material or it can be by airspace. Your static wire, as I mentioned, is the line along the top for lightning protection. The grounded conductor is the wire that runs the entire length of the pole from the top down to the base, and it should be connected to the ground either by a ground rod or by a pole ground. A cutout is a fuse switch combination. It's usually found between the distribution line and a device like a transformer. So here's a cutout on the pole. There are fuse switch combinations. Like I said, they're typically found between the distribution line and the transformer or another device. They look like a wide insulator, and you've got a fuse. You've got a fuse on there, and they can grab it with a hot stick or a shotgun stick, and they can open that to disconnect the power when they're working on it. At the very top of a pole, you've got your transmission, or a lot of times they call it sub-transmission lines. They can be 69 kV, they can even be higher, but that's the real high voltage up there. Primary distribution is the next group down here. They're usually uninsulated conductors. It can be 1 to 4. Often they're on a cross arm coming across the pole here, and they're generally operating in the 4 to 35 kV range. And then your secondary distribution, usually below the transformer, is 1 or more insulated conductors and the uninsulated ground neutral conductor. And that's where your service drops are going to come from for your house or for your equipment, whoever's power. Again, transmission is at the top, and then you've got your primary, you've got your transformer, and then your triplex drops. Some rural poles, or poles in rural areas, are single phase. They don't have cross arms. They just have a single conductor running across the top here. And it drops down to your transformer, and then your transformer comes down. This one actually comes down in a pole for underground. And then your neutral conductor is here. And then this is the neutral space, or the safety zone, before your wires. Okay. Qualified. Qualified means one who, possessed by recognized degree, certificate of professional training, or extensive knowledge that they can resolve problems and they can work safely around equipment. Qualified person is one who's received that training and they've demonstrated the skills to be able to work on it safely. It is possible, and in fact likely, for an individual to be considered qualified with regard to certain equipment in the workplace, but unqualified in other equipment. I'm not qualified to work on your equipment, so I can hook up my cable at home, but that's about it. Qualified person shall be capable, as determined by knowledge, of working safely on energized circuits, and that requires the proper techniques, PPE, tools, and shielding materials. Okay, electrical hazards. Only qualified employees that have that training should be working on the equipment. Never assume because you see an open switch or a cutout that the line is de-energized. We work on an electrical grid, so things can be tied together. They can be backfed. Some homeowner may have a generator that isn't hooked up properly that's backfeeding into the line. So just because the switch is open doesn't mean it's de-energized. Never assume because you see a ground wire that it's safely or effectively grounded. Never assume the ground wire is at zero potential. If the neutral is lost, power can return through the ground. If you see down wires, don't approach and touch until they've been de-energized and the area is safe. And before any work is conducted, make sure that the owner-operator of the conductors is notified. One of the things about your basic electrical circuit theory, you think about, you've probably all had the course, you've got a battery, you've got a wire connected to a switch, another wire connected to a lamp, and then a wire returning back. The power wants to make a circuit. It wants to return back to the source. So if that source is a wire, that's the way it's going to go. If that source is ground, it's going to want to go through the ground. If that source is you, it's going to want to go through you. So it's always trying to return to the source. Okay, be aware of your surroundings, the stability, age, and conditions of poles. Like I mentioned, less than half of the poles that need to be replaced are replaced. Old lines typically have a lot of splices. So this is a picture I took. This is down in Philly, but there's a whole pile of splices in that line. So that tells me it's an old line. They've spliced it before. Okay, if you're out there in your high wind conditions or something else, how safe is it? You might want to take extra precautions when you see that. If you see downed or cross wires, the ground around a power line may be energized up to 35 feet away. One of our linemen was doing storm restoration work, set down his chainsaw, moved a branch, reached down, grabbed the chainsaw, and got a shock through the ground because there was a live wire touching the ground somewhere in the area he was working. So you need to be careful. If you're not sure, you want to stay back. Vegetation, broken branches, they can conduct. Okay, just because it's wood doesn't mean it's not going to conduct, especially if it's wet. Okay, a new branch, there's moisture in that branch. It can conduct. And if you got high enough voltage, I said it's looking for that path to return back to the source. Okay, electrical shocks, burns, physical injuries, and falls. There's been a lot of cases where people working on a pole got shocked and they fall out of the bucket, off a ladder, something else. So you've got to be very careful working around that stuff. Falling objects, you know, you're up there, you're pulling on a cable to stretch it across a road or something like that. You know, are the other cables on that pole attached properly? Is there an insulator that's failing that may drop on your line? So you've got to think about what's going on. Are there broken branches anywhere near? Are you missing a ground? Vandals and copper thieves seem to like to steal a lot of grounds. The old ground wires were bare copper. Now they're insulated, but they still steal them. So you want to be careful. If they are bare copper, then you have to be even more careful, because if it's not properly grounded and that becomes energized, obviously it's easier for you to come in contact with it. Crossed or fallen wires, leaking transformers, or issues with the ground with the cross arms. Treat any down wire as if it was live until you know for sure. Down power lines can energize things around it, chain link fences, puddles, anything that's metal. Don't attempt to move the down wire unless you've been trained and have the proper equipment. As I said, non-conductive materials can conduct even if slightly wet. So if a lineman out there, he's going to have his gloves and he's going to have a hot stick that he can move things with. You think, okay, I'll just grab a piece of wood and I'll move it. Well, you might not live to tell the tale. Don't drive over down power lines. And then PPE is essential to working around the equipment. And the proper way to move away from down power lines is to shuffle. It's due to step potential. When you have a down power line, as I said, the ground around it becomes energized. And as it moves, that energy moves through that soil, it creates a potential difference. And when you have a potential difference, whatever that is, that voltage is going to be across that source. So if you're standing and your feet are 3 feet apart, okay, there's a potential difference between your feet. So if you're shuffling or hopping, if you're in your vehicle and a line comes down in your vehicle and you have to get out, you should stay in it, but if you have to get out, you want to hop out. You don't want to be touching your vehicle and the ground at the same time. So, if you are in an area and there is a down power line or something, so you want to shuffle or hop away from it. You don't want to create that step potential. So you can be electrocuted just by being too close to a down wire without being touched close to it. Again, branches should only be removed using insulated equipment to use the right tool for the job. Okay, so some safety tips. You want to stand back. You want to look at the big picture. You want to see what's going on there. You want to look, you want to listen, you want to smell, and you want to test. use your senses. And then the sixth sense is that little voice in the back of your head that says, I'm not comfortable with this. Okay, so you stand back, you take a look. This here, there's a split in the pole. Okay, that's where the attachment is right there. Okay, is that attachment good? Could this come down? I mean, in this condition, you can see it's a blue sky, it's a nice day, probably not, but you still want to be a little bit cautious. A leaning pole, why is it leaning? Is there a broken guy wire? Is the bad soil conditions? Is the pole rotted? Has it been hit? So you want to take a look at the area around it. Concealment, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. This is actually a secondary circuit. I'm guessing it's probably 35 kV. It actually comes off a pole, drops down through a switch, runs through an intersection, which I have another picture of later on, and then continues on. But you can see where it is. You can actually see it sagging off of its messenger here, and here's your lines. That's not 30 inches. Okay, it's very close. And actually, when it goes through the intersection, to me, it looks like it actually touches. So, is it energized? I don't know. But again, that's one of those things, if I was working on that, I would want to talk to the utility, find out if that's energized before I went up there. Okay, so stand back, look at the big picture. What do you see? Look for low clearances, hanging wires, sparks, smokes, cross lines, charred poles. I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on, but if you have a line, a ground line, let's say coming down a pole, and it becomes energized, that pole will char, okay? So when you're looking up at a pole, if you see charred on the side of the pole, that's an indication that there is or was a problem. So you want to be a little bit more careful before you get into something. Listen for humming, buzzing, or hissing sounds. That could be arcing or corona. Okay, something's happening. I'll talk a little bit later, a case here where there was a hanging ground wire and the neutral bonding jumper was missing. That line was energized. It was about a quarter to a half an inch away from an energized line. It was actually arcing across. And the telecommunication worker ended up getting killed because of that. There was 880 volts induced onto that line from the arcing, and he came in contact with it. It was on the back side of the pole, and he reached around, not seeing it, and came in contact. Do you smell smoke, smoldering, burning insulation, ozone, or melting plastic? They're all indications of an electrical problem, a short, something else is happening there. And then you've all heard test before touch. Use a calibrated and approved meter. I don't know what you guys are given or what levels you're allowed to work up to, but you want to test it before you touch something. Check your messenger. Okay, if that's energized, you got a problem. It should be bonded. Or if that's bonded and grounded and something else, like I said, that ground wire hanging down there, some copper thief cut it and it's hanging there, there could be a potential difference between that. And even if you don't get electrocuted, if you get a shock and fall off a ladder or something else, you're going to end up being hurt. Direct contact is when any part of your body touches something. And indirect contact is when some part of your body comes in contact. I have a case later on in here where a telecommunication worker was working out of a bucket and was maneuvering, and his head actually came in contact with a 12 kV line. Okay, didn't end well. It was at the wrong place at the pole again. So, that was indirect contact. He wasn't reaching, he wasn't planning to do it, he just came in contact with it. Electric shock will occur whenever you become, whether it's direct or indirect, in contact with an energized line. And again, you've got to be grounded or connected to the circuit or touching something else that you shouldn't be touching. But okay, what are the risks? So here's a couple of things I was talking about. There's one telecommunication worker came into an underground line he dug into, didn't know it was there. Mistakenly lifted an energized power line while performing tree trimming work. Working from an aerial platform, heard and saw the bridle wire arcing. One leg of the primary had come off and was actually resting against the metal pins for the insulator. Turned his head. Here's the one to identify obstructions. His forehead came in contact with a 12 kV power line. Power line had been incorrectly placed at nearly the same pole height as the telecommunication line. So the fact that the National Electrical Safety Code says you're supposed to have 30 to 40 inches, obviously it doesn't happen all the time. Splicing, cable strand pulled loose, fell to the ground. Fortunately, nobody got hurt. Another one caused an electrical fire, causing a member to be nearly thrown out of an aerial bucket. Hit by electric shock, died en route to the hospital. The power was draining through the electrical service ground conductor and bleeding back into the telecommunication line. Raising and tensioning a line came in contact with a sagging power line. And working in snowy conditions, obviously bad weather, can adversely affect conditions if you're wet or something else. So, I mean, no matter what you're doing, you need to be careful. You know, if your ladder or something else comes in contact, there's going to be a problem. Why do these things happen? Pressure on you guys to cut corners. You got to do more with less. That seems to be the byword these days. So you've got increased number of tasks and assignments, increased overtime work, lack of awareness or knowledge, performing work in an unsafe manner. You're fatigued, poor lighting conditions, improper tools, weather, environment, improper or damaged tools, or you're distracted, emotional, often anger or unfocused. I've been involved with a number of forensic investigations over the years, and I want to say 9 out of 10 times the person's emotional state had something to do with it. They were angry about something, they were angry with whoever they were working for, they were getting yelled at or something else, and they weren't focused on their tasks, they missed a step, and they paid the ultimate price for it. Okay, bonding, like I said, everything is tied together. So that's your amplifier box, that's the messenger, that's the transformer, that's the metal cases. Grounding is actually when you're tying it to the earth. Power conductors should be considered energized. Again, this is from OSHA. Unless you can determine that they are bonded to one of the grounds listed. So you've got a protective ground, you've got the ground wire coming down, your communication cable sheath or shield is supposed to be bonded as well. And again, you want to be bonded to all the metallic things want to be tied together and hopefully tied to the neutral. Your multi-grounded conductor is a single uninsulated conductor, and that would be right here. You're effectively grounded when you intentionally connect to the earth through a ground connection or low impedance path. The National Electrical Code requires 25 ohms or less. Some utilities require 5 ohms or less. Okay, good ground or low ground resistance is the key to keeping you safe. Electricity takes all paths to ground. You know, people say, oh, it takes the path of least resistance. No, it takes all paths. So if you're touching something and you become part of that circuit, you're in parallel with it. So some of it's going to go through you, some of it's going to go through that other device. So if it's a ground wire and it's low resistance, the majority of it is going to go through that ground wire, and you're going to get a shock and say, uh-oh, I got a problem here. But if that ground isn't a good ground, you become the primary, and the bulk of the current goes through you. Pole lines are continually subject to fault current flow to ground. The fault may be the result of equipment failures, phase to ground faults, accidents, vegetation, animals, or lightning surges. Ground resistance, the larger part of the fault current will flow through the ground conductor, ideally. The remainder will divide and take other paths to ground, which may be the strand on your equipment or you. So the other thing with the lower ground resistance means there's higher fault current. So that means the protective devices are going to operate more quickly and protect you. In this one here, you can see the ground coming down. It's actually spliced and goes down to a ground rod. Utility poles are either have a driven ground rod or a pole butt ground. Distribution systems with a common neutral. The neutral is shared between primary and secondary services, so the neutral is multi-grounded. And there should be at least 4 ground connections per mile in that system. So not every pole is going to have a ground. If there's a transformer on the pole, there's a very good chance it's going to have a ground. And if your equipment is on the pole, there should be a ground there. The grounding points, the neutral is bounded to the ground wire that runs vertically to the pole ground, and if it's a ground rod, it's supposed to be 8 feet into the ground. The butt ground is either wrapped around the butt of the pole or to a plate that's stapled on the bottom of the pole. The pictures are kind of hard to see, but this one here has a ground rod, and then this one is a butt ground. It just disappears into the ground. Static lines connected to the ground circuit. And in this case here, you've got a static line, which, like I said, is for lightning protection, and there's standoffs, and you can actually see the ground wire coming around the insulated conductors and then comes down the pole. So you guys are permitted, in some cases required, to bond your messenger to the grounding system at the utilities pole. So again, you want to make sure that before you touch anything, all the metallic parts are ground and at zero potential. So here we've got a transformer on the pole. Here's the neutral of the ground coming down. It's spliced, connects to the messenger or to the neutral, and comes down the pole. Looks like a pretty good install, right? Unfortunately, the ground wire is cut about 6 feet above the pole. Generally, the tags on the pole are about 6 feet. So it's cut here and down here. So copper thieves apparently cut that ground. So that even though when you look up at the pole, it looks like everything's fine, it's not. One of the fatalities that I was talking about before, communication worker looked at the base of the pole, saw there was no ground, figured he was safe, and went up. Again, somebody had cut the copper and stolen it. That's why he didn't see it. That's the one where it was actually hanging and had the 880 volts connected to it. Another joint pole with a missing ground. You can see that's what's left of it. There's a staple right there, so they cut above there and they cut below it. Not always is it stolen. Here's one that's actually hanging here, and the rest of it's there, so it was hit by a mower or somebody weed whacking or a piece of farm equipment or something else. So you want to take a look and see. A good ground, or just good ground cover. Here's the ground wire right there, and this is, of course, all poison ivy. I don't want to necessarily go poking around in there to make sure that it's really grounded, but you want to take a look. You've got high grass or scrubs or something else. It makes it harder to tell if there's a good ground or not. So you want to recognize and avoid the dangers, and per OSHA you also want to be aware of plant life, insects, animals, and other things that can be harmful to you. So you want to look for broken or cut grounds, bad ground connections, corrosion, gaps in the ground wire, missing clamps, bad splices, missing or disconnected bonding jumpers. In the case where the ground wire was hanging, a utility worker had actually gotten a small shock. He put his ladder up against the pole previous to the fatality and got a shock off the top rung of his ladder. They thought it was because of a disconnected service drop, so they taped it up and they didn't look any further. Had they looked further, they would have realized that ground wire that was hanging wasn't connected and was actually getting voltage induced on it. Again, 30 inches at midspan, 30 inches below the transformer, and 40 inches at the pole. And a lot of times when you look, you can see you don't have your clearances here. The approach distance, there's actually a table in OSHA that says how close that you should get to an energized line. Generally, I said 69 kV, so you look at 42 and 36 inches, that's where the 30 and 40 inches is coming from, because 15 kV or a 69 kV is going to be in the 30 to 40 inch range there. So that's why you're supposed to have that neutral zone to protect you. This also applies to derrick trucks and similar equipment if you're working on those. So this is the table. The other thing that's interesting is even 300 volts below, it says avoid contact. So you don't want to come in contact with it. Working around trees, you got to be very careful because, like I said, power will pass through that. A tree can be a conductor. If you're doing tree work, again, there's a table in here again, and so 3 feet and down is what you want to maintain if there's trees there. So you've got to be very conductor. This is that intersection I was talking about before. This is that line coming through. It is raised up, but you can see it sags down in about the middle of this intersection. To me, it looks like it actually contacts that line. This is a transition pole, obviously, but it also has the old 3-wire system that they had, which you do run into as opposed to the triplex in a lot of cases. If you're working on a crane around power lines, again, up to 50 kV, you want 10 foot between the crane and those lines. Okay, one of the other tools you have is, I don't know what you guys call it, but a job hazard analysis or job safety analysis or your tailboard. You want to inspect the work area. Before the work is performed, look for potential safety and health hazards. Like I said, look at the big picture, look, listen, smell, use your senses to see what's going on there. Use your engineering controls, your shielding devices and specialized equipment. You want to use ergonomic and insulated tools. Use the proper PPE. I don't know if you guys have insulated blankets, but you probably have gloves and stuff, so make sure you're using those, your goggles, footwear, and your other clothing. Consider the surroundings, condition of the pole. Is there snow, ice, wind, decay on the pole? Soil conditions, a lot of times that's why poles are leaning. Our linemen were putting a pole in last spring, I guess it was, when we had it was the end of last year when we had all the rains. And the guy wires and everything else on one of the new poles they put in ended up creating some give in the pole. And with all the rain and everything else, the new pole they put in actually burned up. It came too close to a 25 kV line and actually charred the pole. They had to replace it. So you got to be careful. Distractions, obviously you're working around traffic, noise, you've got dust and debris, you may have poor visibility, weather conditions, so you want to be very careful. Live power lines on the ground can be hard to see because of vegetation and the other cover, so again, look. Assume that they're all energized, never assume it's safe to touch. Call the utility, stay at least 10 feet away from overhead lines during cleanup. Survey the area, and again, if they fall on your vehicle, stay in your vehicle. If for some reason you absolutely have to get out, like I said, you want to do it with great care and hop out. When you're working according to OSHA in close proximity to energized power lines, a second worker has to be there and trained in first aid and CPR. Okay, gloves, and if you have blankets or any of those things you use, they have to be inspected and recertified, so I want to make sure that you're doing that. It's generally 12 to 18 months. I don't know what your policy is, but I want to make sure that they are inspected and that they are tested and they're good. Gloves that are found to be defective in the field need to be destroyed. One of the utilities that we did work for was a contractor on the site that had laid his gloves down, and the safety inspector walked up and looked, and they weren't, took out a pair of scissors and cut the fingers off the gloves. So a lot of utilities take it very, very seriously. Head protection, make sure your hard hat is Class E. I talked about the one where the guy hit his forehead on a 12 kV line. So make sure that you have a hard hat that is Class E. They will protect you up to 20,000 volts. The older hard hats used to be Class B. And there should be a sticker or maybe a raised imprint on the inside of it that tells you that it meets those requirements. Eye protection, obviously gloves, all the other things you want to wear because you want to protect against, like I said, blowing debris, or if you're cutting, or even brush, tree branches, anything else. Make sure you have the proper PPE. Want some more information on Tri-M or energy test? We've got our websites here. I don't know if this one will work, but can you start this video? I think it'll. This is Jersey Power and Light. Both videos are the same, but the other one requires the Wi-Fi. But the beginning of this, the other actually shows the night before, and you can just kind of see with the weather conditions what was going on. Should just be able to click on it. Okay. So, but this is JCP&L. Later on will be involved in this, and you'll see one of their workers working on a dead utility line. But most of this is from dash cams from. Is it?
I don't. You tell me, Rob.
Yeah, I don't know. You should be able to just click on the.
That's from the Nervy one.
So I tried it when I put it on the thumb drive and it worked, but if you just click on the center of the video, it should.
Oh, okay. Nope, no me gusta.
That's interesting.
No.
Well, try it. You can try the other one, the one previous, and see if that one works. Same thing, but I don't know why that. So I tried it when I put it on the thumb drive and it worked, but.
Yeah, it might.
If you want to fire your laptop up, and we can just plug right in HDMI.
Okay. So any questions while I'm doing this?
You mentioned the 30 inches between Power and us. Is there anything that states once that's reported, how long they have to do it?
That I don't know. I'm sure it probably depends on the utility, obviously.
What do they do in cases where it's not, because we have some backyard poles that are short, and they're at the top, well, maybe 15, 20 inches, and that's at about the 8 to 10 foot mark
Mm-hmm.
for the ground. So
Okay. So if you have a shorter pole in a residential area, you may have a smaller area and it may only be 8 or 10 feet off of the ground. I mean, unfortunately, in some old residential areas, or if you're, in some of the alleys and stuff down in Philly or something, you're going to run into those conditions, and it just, I mean, it's going to require extra care, I guess, on your part, because I don't know that there's, I don't know what they're going to do to fix that, to be perfectly honest.
You don't know if we turn it in, it's all eventually go around and maybe put taller poles in? Or?
I mean, I'm sure they will eventually, but I'm sure just like you guys, they have budgets, and so like I said, I know some of the statistics that I saw, less than half of the poles that are supposed to be replaced, they actually have the budget to replace. So.
Save money that a CEO when we finance. I said, now we're just going to do spring splices. Every 2 years they'll start failing. He retired and left, saving a ton of money, now they're out replacing everything.
Mm-hmm. That's the ones that got the little flare at the end, right?
Mm-hmm. Big fail, man. The springs is good. People guys are all pissed off.
I see one back right now.
Chief?
Yes. Let's see where.
Here, Rob, you got that camera over there? All right. Hold on a sec.
Okay, so this is the night before, and you can see with the storm and the weather, I don't know where the line is hitting something or what it's doing. I don't really know, but it's obviously shorting out. So the next day, you can see the JCPL guy here, and the line is, this dead line is hanging over the top of this pole. He's trying to flip it off the top of the pole. He's all suited up, got his PPE on, and he's working here. And here comes the line. Oh, whoa, it was energized. Okay, very lucky guy right there. So that's what can happen. And I said that's from a dash cam. The other thing that's interesting is when you look at the guy, you can see there's a delay between the flash and the fire and when he moves, because your reaction just isn't that quick. So.
Wouldn't that street light be energized then?
Yeah. Absolutely, very likely, absolutely. So if somebody had gone over and touched that pole or whatever. And I mean, there's been a number of cases where I want to say dogs have, male dogs have had unfortunate contact with light poles with that effect. One of the earliest ones where there was actually a lawsuit over was back in the 70s, and then after that they started going around putting ground rods and stuff by all the light poles, which may or may not help depending on who you talk to. But then more recently there was a female attorney who was walking her male dog and had the same thing occur. And that's probably within the last 10 years or so, and obviously there was a lawsuit over that too. And then what they ended up having to do is go back and actually put electrical ground conductors from each one of the poles back in order to have an effectively grounded system. So
when there's the ground's missing from the poles that have the transformers on them, like so somebody stole it, so we do our foreign voltage test and it comes up clean, should we still not for potential of that ground being cut, or we should?
no, okay, if you're working on a pole and you see the line is cut, you check it, it's at zero potential, should you not work on it. If everything else is in place, that ground or your ground should be tied to the neutral multi-grounded conductor up above. Should also be tied to the guy wires, it should be tied to the whole system. So if everything is in place correct and you're reading 0 volts, you should be okay, even though that ground is missing. Where you get into problems is if it's not. Now, in the one case that I was talking about, in addition to the ground wire being cut and it being bare copper, the jumper between the transformer and the ground the clamp wasn't connected for some reason. They don't know why, they weren't able to determine that. So that copper wire that was hanging was just hanging. It wasn't doing anything up above except coming in contact or close proximity to an energized line. So, that's really what the hazard is, on that. So,
Best judgment.
yeah. Anything else? So, one of the points with my video here is, this is a lineman for a utility who has had training, has PPE and everything else, and he mistakenly thought a line was dead that wasn't, and you see the results of that. So you want to be very, very, very careful. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There we go.
Oops.
That's all right. When he's done talking, you just have to give me a sec because I have to unplug one thing and plug another. We're a little high tech, low tech.
Okay. Zach should be a familiar face for most of you. He's the sales manager for, keep me honest, for Comcast?
Yeah, I'm a telecommunications specialist, but I handle Freedom, Keystone, Beltway for Comcast.
So, take it away.
So, first of all, thank you to everybody for having me in. Rob and the Eastern Pennsylvania takes a lot of pride in supporting as much as we can the SCTE. Believe the trainings, the little bit we're going to do, but more so every month or whatever it may be, every other month giving these trainings, I think is a great value to you. So thank you guys for having me. I want to start with prefacing this. I'm going to go over the pre-operational inspection as well as a lot of recommendations that have been put in place by Altec. Your employer is going to specify most of these. It's going to be right in line with what we're doing because it comes from OSHA. However, there may be a couple things, whether it's your PPE, things like that, that could differ a little bit. So please make sure that we are taking consideration of that when we go through these things. I'll direct it. I spend a lot of time in Comcast shops, those kind of things, so I'll direct a lot of it towards it. You said we don't have anybody outside of Comcast today, I don't think. So that makes it a little bit easier. So bear with me as we go through this. The way I like to do this, instead of a PowerPoint, I actually have a safety video, and I like to emphasize and put it more into practical terms. So I'm going to have the video play and stop it, go through certain aspects as we go through the video. And once we get to the, as we go, do we do questions at the end, or would you rather? We can do questions throughout. I like to keep it going and go directly to what we're talking about at that point. So please stop me. Guys, in the end, I'm going to symbolize all of this. The reason we go through all this, the reason we ask you to do it, the reason OSHA tells you to do it, the reason your employer tells you to do it, is to get you home safe at night. The last presenter did the exact same thing. It's all about safety and making sure that you get home. You guys do a hard job that's extremely important, but we want to make sure it's done at the safest way possible. So, Rob, you want to go ahead and get it started?
These guys are trained professionals. That's why they make safety their first priority every time they go to work. They don't do it alone. They've got a team of experts dedicated to properly checking and maintaining their equipment to make sure they get home safely at the end of their shift. You too are a trained professional. That's why safety should be just as high a priority every time you start your shift. It's a continuing effort that often starts. Doesn't stop until you at the end of the day. And it's not something you have to do alone either. The Altec team is dedicated to keeping you safe on the job. It's something we've always made a priority. We respect the work you do and want to support you in any way we can. We're going to show you how to properly operate Altec equipment, and we're going to give you information that can help you get through your shift safely. This video is part of the training you'll receive on safe operating procedures for Altec equipment. So in addition to reading, understanding, and following the safety and operating procedures found in the manufacturer's manual, unit decals, and other materials provided with the unit, we ask that you watch this video carefully and with an open mind for safety as it pertains to your individual job needs. What you'll see can prevent serious work-related injuries and can ultimately save your life or the life of a coworker. Inspection, which meets Department of Transportation regulations, as well as procedures described in the unit manual, is required and should first include a tire inspection because the capacity and stability of an aerial device is affected by the chassis tires. Plus, an inspection of chassis fluid levels and fluid leaks are recommended by the manufacturer. It should include a check of the oil level and hydraulic reservoir as described in the unit manual and a check for hydraulic leaks on the unit. If you find a hydraulic leak, contact a qualified hydraulic mechanic designated by your employer. And remember, never use your hands to check for leaks on a pressurized hydraulic system. The fluid can become injected under the skin, causing severe injury. Should this happen, seek medical attention immediately. Your daily inspection should next include an inspection of lights, flashers, turn signals and signal devices, as well as a visual inspection of boom hinge pin, cylinder pins, turntable and frame bolts, and other fasteners, welds, hydraulic cylinders, hoses, and tubes to ensure that they're in place and show no evidence of damage, cracks, or corrosion. Fiberglass boom structures, platforms, and platform mounting hardware should be checked for damage. Platform door latches and secondary door restraints must be checked for engagement and to be sure they function properly. Also, if your unit is equipped with a primary or secondary DC pump, this is a good time to inspect the cables which connect it to the chassis electrical system.
So guys, whenever we go through this pre-operational inspection, everybody goes, well, I got to get out to the job. I got to get my job done. Supervisor's got me on a time crunch. I got to get work done. Guys, I'm not asking you to get under the truck on a crawler and take a look at anything underneath. I'm not asking you to torque any bolts, anything like that. This is simply a visual inspection, okay? It's required by OSHA to do every shift. And I use the word shift because you could go out in the morning, do your daily job, and then we have an emergency outage at night, and you get called back out, okay? We want to do it at that point, okay? So it's extremely important. I'm going to go through some of the key components of it, and make sure you're taking the time to do it. OSHA does mandate it. I will always start with a manual. All right. This manual, I always recommend that the operator of the unit read it front to back. I have to do that. It is important to understand the information. Please always read through it. If you have any questions, you can always reference back. If you have any direct questions, guys, you have a representative that can answer those questions in this region. I guess for everybody in Eastern PA, it's me. So feel free to give me a call, give your supervisor a call. I believe I know every maintenance supervisor within the region, as well as the fleet team. So feel free to reach out with that. The second big part of this is required to be put in your truck. On an Altec truck, it's behind the driver's seat. It's in every manufacturer's truck. So it's going to be required. If an OSHA inspector were to stop you, there's a very, very good chance they're going to ask you to present this to them. They also may ask you who's familiar with the operator's manual. All right? Make sure you're the guy that can raise their hand. All right? All your required stickers are in here. Okay? Everything that's required to be on the truck is part of this. All right? We also put the serial number in here, which is actually a nice little reference for you. You can call anything that's been worked on the truck by an Altec employee can also be referenced here. So again, not manufacturer specific, but everybody will have these in their truck in a specific place. Make sure you know where it's at. Usually what happens is if somebody were to get asked, you go, yeah, I got it. Let me find it. Okay. You should know where it's at. You should be able to easily access it. I want to point out this manual. It's not actually as important to you as it is for any technician working on your truck. Anytime a manufacturer builds something, there's a lot of pieces that come together to build what you see out there. That actually comes in as a flat piece of steel and turns into that. Okay? Every part that's used on this, to build that, is in here. Importantly, wiring schematics are in here, things like that, so we're not chasing wires. The goal in telecommunications is always going to be eliminate downtime for an error device. We want you guys working, using the device for what it's made to do. Having these things be able to present them is going to make it easier for you. Okay? Pretty straightforward. It also allows you to get the correct parts. It allows you to have the correct information at your hands for your own safety. Okay? Pre-operational inspections. I've done an in-service with there's a lot of familiar faces here on trucks throughout the region. Very similar to that, but we want to make sure we're doing it every single day. All right? I always start with pins, fasteners, welds. All right? Those welds are lifetime warranty. They are put together as well as possibly can be. That does not mean a weld can't crack, guys. What if it's laying under one of these trees that are out back? You go up, you do your job, you come back, park the truck, big branch falls on it, hits it, rolls off to the side. Cracks a weld, you get in the truck, you drive it away, and the first thing you're going to do is jump in that bucket and go up, and now you got a crack on your lower arm. Okay? Guys, I'm not asking you to do anything crazy. Do a visual inspection. If you take a look around the truck at every single weld on the truck, you're going to notice day in and day out what's different, what's missing, if there is a crack. Okay? Again, it's a visual inspection. If you feel comfortable, run your finger over it, something like that. You saw it in the video there. All right. Major pins. Major pins have torque stripes on them, which is a little piece of blue paint, red paint, depending on who's doing your service. They're going to put a torque stripe on it. If that torque stripe's cracked, please do not operate. The other facet of that, even if there isn't a torque stripe on it, please take the time. Again, if you look at it every single day, you're going to notice if it's out of place. All right, so there's a washer type thing on the outside of the lower boom pin. Make sure that that's on there. If it's missing, something happened to that pin. Okay, pretty straightforward. We're going to get into it here in the next section, but I want to make a strong point on stability. We just saw the video from the gentleman that spoke about the power and electrical. We saw a lot of trucks that are used in the electrical industry that are insulated, okay? In the telecommunications space, these trucks are designed, they are non-insulated aerial devices, okay? He did a fantastic job of going through distances and explaining all that. I don't go into that, it's not my specialty, but just to understand your awareness and understand that these units are non-insulated. If you come in contact with an energized line, there's nothing up there to protect you as far as a fiberglass insert or anything like that, okay? With that, the stability factor. You do not need outriggers on these machines, as you guys know. All right. There's 4 real keys to stability on the trucks that we're building today. The torsion bar underneath. Guys, I'm not asking you on a crawler and get under there and look at the torsion bar. All right. Peek your head under, make sure it's still there. There actually is a torque stripe over top of the rear axle in the newer trucks that shows you if it's going to be in line or not. If that line is off, we do want to take a look at it. Okay. I'll be honest with you, I've never seen one off, but I always make that point just in case it does happen. Okay. So take the time, take a look at that. More importantly, or most importantly, is your tires. These things, they're tested to more than what it's rated for your safety, but it's based on OEM manufactured tires being filled to those PSI levels, right? So the newer Ford, let's say the Ford F450 just for an example, they're 95 cold in the front, 90 cold on the back, all right? We want to make sure the tires are filled to that level at all times. That's the key to your stability. Think about it as your feet. And when I say that, there's 2 keys to that, right? There's keys whenever you're operating the boom, and that is extremely important for your stability going side to side. It also is important whenever you're driving the truck. You leave here today, go to your job site. We're in eastern Pennsylvania. We got hills, off ramps, everything else. The Ford F450, though we're well within the VCG, which is the vertical center of gravity, the weight's here, and now your weight's here. And your tires are low. You're going off an off ramp a little fast. Think about that, okay? So we want to make sure those tires are filled to that recommendation. Excuse me. So, wheel chocks, anytime the truck is being operated, wheel chocks need to be out. Altec recommends on the downhill side, whatever Comcast your supervisor tells you is what you want to go with, however. But wheel chocks always need to be out. It's an easy indicator for an OSHA inspector, and it's key to making sure that truck, though you have to engage the emergency brake, it is still something that's a backup for that to happen. Keep you still, okay? One of the most important parts here, and there's always a 4th one, I'm always going to say this, is these things are tested, rated, and designed to be operated within 5-degree slope. That's front, back, side to side. You see any of the trucks, they have an L bracket as the front, back, side to side. We understand you're in Eastern PA. I understand that sometimes your slope is here and you got to get to that pole right there. Guys, what I'm going to tell you is that truck was tested at 5 degrees. Okay, it was not tested past that. It was tested with the capacity a little bit over what it is, but that's for your own safety. Okay, we want to make sure we're staying within the capacity, which is on the placard on the boom, and within that 5 degrees at all times. Okay, the only thing that's going to stop you from working outside 5 degrees is yourself. That truck's not going to turn off. There's nothing going to happen if you go to 6 or 7 degrees other than you're putting yourself at risk. So that's why we make sure we make that point very, very strong to make sure that we're doing that. Okay. Any questions on 5 degrees? I understand that sometimes it's a little harder than, just driving up to your job site. All right. Lights. They mentioned lights in here. And I always say, and this is maybe just a Zach Pennington line, probably nobody else says it, but lights are the easiest thing to say, I get it tomorrow. Right? Light goes out, let's say your strobe at the top goes out. Your beacon light. You go, yeah, I'll get it tomorrow. 3 weeks later, we're still saying I'm going to get it tomorrow because it doesn't stop your operation. It doesn't mess with the function of the boom of the truck. However, what it does is it allows people to see you. All right? We don't want to put yourself or your company into a situation because we didn't take the time to get the light. If the light goes out, get them fixed immediately. There are technicians on the road that can get to you the next day with those lights on their trucks to get them fixed. Okay? I always use an example. We did have a company out west that guy did everything right. He had an extra strobe light out. Lady was texting and driving, blew the cones, ran directly into the back of the truck, did a life fight the passenger. They pulled that gentleman and the company into a lawsuit for over a year. I don't know how it settled out, those kind of things, but don't put yourself or the company in that position. Take care of that light, get it fixed. It's for your own safety to light you up. Being that we have all Comcast here, every truck they've ordered for the last 7 to 8 years, they have put excess strobe lights on there for your safety, okay? Obviously, the DOT lights are required to be on there. There are excess strobe lights to light you up when you're there. Turn them on, make sure they're operating, okay? Any questions on any of that? Pretty straightforward. Guys, anything I went through there is nothing out of the ordinary that you guys shouldn't be looking for every shift you go out. I want to, the last part of any pre-operational inspection is the fly from, go ahead.
One thing on the lights.
Yep.
On the multiple LED strobes, what's the percentage of them out before they have to be changed?
The percentage, how dim they are?
Or how many of the little LEDs are out off of?
Oh, you're talking about the marker lights.
No, it's like some of our new trucks have the LED strobes on the side.
On
that
the
have
side of the truck.
On the sides of them, so when you turn the strobes on, they flash.
Yep.
And there's, I don't know, probably 20 or 30 little LEDs in there.
I gotcha. You're having certain portions of that full light
Yeah.
that are going out. So those lights in particular are actually excess lights. When I say that, Comcast put those on there in excess of what's required by FMVSS to light you up. I will still recommend if a light's on there, whether it be one little bulb or one full one, let's get it fixed. I'm not going to tell you it's an emergency. Let's get it done. Let's stop work today and get it done. But let's call and say, hey, let's get a technician out here and let's get it fixed. Okay? In the end, those lights, and it's a great question, those lights are to keep you safe. And if there's any way that somebody texting and driving, for example, can see you more, I want to make sure they see you. Does that make sense? Okay. The last portion of a pre-operational inspection is extremely important and the most overlooked, and that is flying the boom from the lower controls. I would really like to figure out that my retract button, my retract hose isn't working when my 2 feet are on the ground rather than being 20 feet in the air. All right? Every single unit is required to have a lower controls. If you have an older van, it's inside the boom. The newer trucks, you're gonna pull it out of the back bin. We give you some slack. You can actually visibly see. I'm not asking you to spin it around for 10 minutes. I'm making sure that it goes up, and more importantly, that it comes back down. Okay? 99 times out of 100, if the truck works from the lower controls, it's gonna work the exact same way at the uppers. The only reason I say that it could be at the uppers is it could be an actual physical switch, something like that. Okay? So take the time to do that. Guys, it shouldn't take you 10 minutes. It's very simple. Pull it out, operate it. That's why we put it where we put it. All right? I can't tell you how many trucks I've rolled up to and we're looking at something else and go, okay, let's play with it. And like, okay, if I'm a lower controls, they're underneath all this stuff here. That shows me that we haven't been doing that. All right? It's important. It's for your safety to take the time to do that. All right? Platforms is something you also want to check. And when I say that, there's 2 reasons. Platforms are made out of fiberglass. All it is fiberglass wound, all right? They could be, I believe on any Comcast truck, it could be 300, 350, or 400 pound capacity. It's all on the sticker. It's based on the model as well as the year it was made, okay? So the newest ones, which was just started last year, came out, they're 400 pounds. What that is just heavily woven fiberglass that's tighter and tighter, okay? It's kind of, I always use the example, an old cotton shirt used to keep you warm down under a shirt. We do that. All right, all we did was wind the fiberglass tighter and tighter to make it do that. But pretty straightforward. We want to make sure there's no cracks. If there is a crack, and it's here, you want to get it replaced. Number 1 is your safety. We do not want you to jump in that truck for whatever reason, it be on a structural, and it grow like that while we're up in the air. Number 2, and I'm always going to say this, your fleet team or your supervisor is going to be really, really happy if we catch it here, because I can fix a piece of fiberglass this big. I cannot fix one like this, and it's very hefty build to replace a platform. So, but more importantly, it's for your safety. If you have a crack in your platform, please get it fixed. The number 1 reason cracks happen are not because we were doing work and we were working hard and we ran into a pole, something like that. It's because we decided to slam it off the tail shelf off the ground, something like that. So just be cautious when we're doing that, okay? Pretty straightforward, but it is definitely important. On those platforms, you guys probably saw, and I don't know if there's any of these left within Comcast fleet, but the old slide unders, where you slide up under, has a ring around the whole top, and you get in and you operate the bucket. Said, well, that's kind of a pain in the butt trying to get in there and move around, so let's put a door on this thing. So we put a door on it. With the door, we had to put what we call a secondary latch. You guys will see it. Some of them are cloth with a little hook on it at the end. Two things, always attach it. It has to be attached. It's one of the things that OSHA is always looking for, and it's extremely important. If you were, for whatever reason, to hit that door and fall into it, we want that the second catch in that latch break. All right? If yours rips off, whatever, if you catch it with one of your tools and it rips off, guys, it needs to be fixed immediately. It's pretty straightforward, like $2. We'll get out there. The technicians in the field can do that. They're easily replaced. They need to be a certain length, so don't just put anything you can on there to fix it, but make sure it's fixed at all times, okay? Also with that is the latch, and this is a Zach Pennington thing, but when I get in a bucket, I close the latch, and I shake it as hard as I can. And everybody goes, what if you break the latch? I'd rather break that latch shaking it than, God forbid, something happened and my body falls into it and breaks that latch, okay? So they're made to seal. If you can break it by going like this, we need to get looked at anyways, okay? Pretty straightforward on all of that. Guys, it's all important. Take the time to do it. It's to get you home safe at night. I don't go into harness and lanyards specifically. I know you guys have a standard harness and lanyard. This is our standard one. Guys, I want to make a strong point. On a bucket truck, I hope that I never have to get a call that somebody needed one of these or that you ever need it. All right? However I can get this on, okay? But that being said, if you do need it, I want it to work at 100%, okay? That being said, you get comfortable with it. You guys work a lot harder than I do, that's why this one's so clean. All right, to be honest with you. So, yours are wear, tear, ripped, fraying, those kind of things. I'm going to speak for any MSO out there that takes the time with SCTE. If you're having ripped, tears, frayings, that kind of thing, please get it replaced. Tell your supervisor, they're happily going to replace it for you, okay? They're going to make sure you're safe, those kind of things. A couple things we're seeing in the industry. This point right here, and I don't know if you guys can see, is a knot. There are ones that have two of these. All right? What we're seeing is, guys, when they're done with the day, instead of taking this all off and putting it in a bin, they're taking this portion off, leaving it on the hook, on the platform, and putting this part in the bin. What that does is allow this to sit in weather for excess time, which can cause structural damage to it over a long period of time. What I'm getting to, guys, is if you have two hooks for whatever reason, please take this and put it inside somewhere. Keep it out of the sun, those kinds of things. Okay? Pretty straightforward. And the dumbest thing I'm going to say today, but we've seen it happen, is that there's one point on your truck, it's stickered, it tells you where your harness and your lanyard attachment point is. That is the only place you hook to, even if it's more comfortable on a non-insulated truck. It can be, we don't have any construction guys. Construction can't have 2 points, but your standard maintenance truck for Comcast has 1 point. Do not hook this to the controls, to the side of the basket. Heck, I've seen it to wires, stuff like that. That platform most likely will never fall off that platform, but whatever, off the boom, but if for whatever reason it does, it needs to be to that welded point. Okay? Again, guys, I usually get some laughs when I say that, but we actually had that happen in the field. All right? Any questions on that stuff? Again, it's very general, but it's extremely important. All right, we're going to move on to travel and job briefing. Oh, it locked me out. Nash 1010. Kind of sad.
When loading the truck for travel, check that all items are secured, bin doors are properly latched, outriggers are raised, and boom is stowed and secure. And remember, never exceed the gross vehicle weight rating. When towing a trailer, be sure that the towing vehicle, pintle hook, and trailer are compatible. Use a trailer tow bar eye, which conforms with SAE J847 and all local and state roading requirements. Inspect the trailer and pintle hook before use for wear and for damage which may require replacement. Do not exceed the manufacturer's rating or towing capacity of the vehicle, pintle hook, or trailer. Always use safety. Do not exceed the manufacturer's rating or towing capacity of the vehicle, pintle hook, or trailer. Always use safety chains of proper capacity in accordance with local, state, and federal roading requirements. Prior to towing, always confirm that all latching mechanisms are properly engaged. Unintended unhitching of a trailer during travel may result in death or serious injury. This is also a good time to check to see that the trailer lights and signaling devices are in place and operational. Some loads may require additional signaling devices depending on local, state, or federal requirements. Before travel, be sure you know the clearance height of the vehicle relative to overhead obstructions such as power lines and bridges. Pre-planning your route of travel can help to avoid these types of obstructions. Once you arrive at the job site, remember to set the parking brake and chock the wheels before leaving the vehicle. And if you must park on a roadway, park on the right-hand side of the road facing the direction of traffic flow. Whenever possible, leave at least 15 feet between the edge of your vehicle and the traveled road surface. If you must park closer, appropriate warning devices must be used. Depending on your employer's recommendations and local, state, or federal requirements, this may include warning lights, reflectors, warning signs, traffic cones, flags, or a flagged person. If you must back up, ensure that your backup alarm is operational and/or use an observer to signal when it is safe to move. Back slowly and always keep the observer in your view. If you cannot see the observer, stop backing until they return to a position where you can see them directly or through a mirror or other rear view device.
Rob, I'm gonna give us a stop there. This one's real brief, but I do want to make a point. Somebody kind of said, I heard a laugh over here, and you're 100% right on the 15 feet from the roadside facing traffic. Your company's going to specify that as to putting your cones out, those kind of things. But please make sure that we understand those procedures as we go through it. All right. I did see the travel height here. As we move through into new trucks, and I go through this when the guys get the new trucks, always know your travel height. Okay? And everybody kind of smiles when I say this, but I get about 2 calls a year about a bridge. The worst call in the world is, I hit a bridge. What do we do? All right? Make sure you know your travel height. Make sure, if you have a scissor, industry term, a scissor lift, which has the lower articulating arm, on the newer ones, it is tied in the drivetrain where you can't drive off. Some of the older ones may or may not have this, where you actually want to make sure you lower that arm the whole way. Okay? What that does, let's say a truck's 11 foot, just for general numbers, 11 foot add riding height, and that's what it says on the sticker. If you were to leave that lower arm up 6 inches, a foot on accident, now you're 12 foot. And that bridge you used to go under, we don't fit under anymore. That's usually actually the situation that arises whenever I get a bridge call. Okay? So please be careful with those. It's for your own safety. Comcast is continuously looking at these things, and they're making a great investment in it. But please, I don't want to go through too much on the voltage and setting up that kind of stuff. You guys already saw that. But any questions on that?
Yeah, I got one question.
Yeah.
When you're chalking, you chalk each wheel or chalk behind one single wheel?
We recommend downhill side. And usually what that is your slope is like that. So I usually put them front back on the downhill side.
Okay.
All right. Good question. All right. You good?
When you arrive at the job site, OSHA requires that the employee in charge of the work hold a job briefing before the start of each job. The briefing shall cover job hazards, work procedures, special precautions, energy source control, and personal protective equipment. When conducting your job briefing, first walk around the job site and identify the location and voltage of overhead power lines. Note that only qualified employees may approach within 10 feet of any energized line. Remember that a qualified employee is one who has been designated by their employer as trained and familiar with the safety-related work practices, procedures, and other safety requirements of OSHA which pertain to their respective job requirement. This includes competency in the skills and techniques necessary to distinguish exposed live parts from other electrical equipment, as well as the ability to determine the nominal voltage of exposed live parts. A qualified employee must also be trained and competent in the skills needed to determine the minimum approach distances specified by OSHA, as well as the special precautionary techniques, insulated tools, equipment, and lockout-tagout procedures necessary for working near exposed energized parts. Your job briefing should include discussions about personal protective equipment required by your employer, which may include clothing as well as head, eye, and fall protection, insulated gloves, and leather gloves. And finally, during the job briefing, it is important to discuss any additional potential hazards associated with the tasks at hand. Aerial devices manufactured and tested to ANSI A92.2 are limited to their rating capacity, with the unit set up on a maximum of a 5-degree slope. You should never operate an aerial device on a slope of over 5 degrees. This is especially true of operations that include rotation of the boom over the side of the chassis. Overloading the aerial device boom can result in structural damage, instability, or both. Thus, the unit's rated capacity must never be exceeded. Altec strongly recommends completing a pre-operational check from the lower controls and upper controls. During this check, you should check the oil level in the hydraulic reservoir and check for hydraulic leaks. Visually inspect pins, fasteners, welds, hydraulic cylinders, hoses, and tubes. Check visual and audible warning devices. Inspect fiberglass boom structures, platforms, and liners for dirt and damage. Apply the parking brake, place the wheel chocks, start the engine, and engage the power takeoff. Once the unit is set up, a pre-operational check should also be completed from the lower controls and upper controls. Be sure that the area is free from overhead obstructions such as trees, poles, and power lines. Then operate the unit through the range of all functions to ensure proper operation. While operating from the lower controls, be sure that you and others are clear of moving structures. Altec aerial devices may be equipped with a secondary stowage system powered by a DC pump. This system is designed to allow the boom to be stowed if the chassis engine is not operational. The controls for the secondary stowage systems vary by model. Consult your unit's operator's manual for instructions. Test the override system at the lower control station, remembering that the lower controls should override the function of the upper controls. Upon completion of the operational check, from the lower controls, return the boom to the boom rest, or orient the platform near the ground for platform access. You are now ready to test the unit operation from the upper controls, making certain that the upper control selector functions stop system operation. OSHA regulations and ANSI standards require that personal fall protection equipment be used and attached to the unit's fall protection anchor points. Prior to entering the platform, be sure you are using approved personal fall protection equipment that you have inspected for damage. Platform door latches and secondary door restraints must also be checked for engagement and to be sure they function properly. The precautionary measures you've just seen can not only protect you and others from personal injury, but they can also save you from downtime. So please, take the time you need for safety even before you begin operation of your unit. And remember, because almost every job and each piece of equipment will create a different situation, it is your ultimate responsibility to assess your job carefully and understand and follow all applicable laws, regulation, and the safety requirements of your employer. With that said, it's time to continue on and prepare for the job at hand.
One thing that was mentioned in the pre-operational inspection I don't believe I actually touched on was hydraulic fluid. Okay? I want to make a strong point on hydraulic fluid, and again, when I say this, it's not meant to scare you, it's made to basically inform you. Okay? Hydraulic fluid, these things run at about 2,000 psi. Hydraulic fluid on the skin is not dangerous. Okay? Within the bloodstream, however, it can be very dangerous. Okay? So if you have an open wound, or you were to somehow get a puncture wound from the hydraulic fluid, if the PTO is on, it's running really fast. It's going to hit your hand, sting it, and if it gets in your bloodstream, we've seen as far as major surgery, the whole way to amputation, guys. If you get medical attention immediately, it can be handled pretty easily. Okay. If you have a hydraulic leak, usually it's going to be under the cab or at the knuckle of the boom. Okay. You can smell it. You can also see it. But all you want to do is turn PTO off and get the truck back, or we can get a technician out there on site. Okay. Pretty straightforward, but again, not too scary, but simply to inform you. If you have a hydraulic leak, do not try to fix it. Do not put your hand under a cover to see, oh, I think there's a hydraulic leak, something like that. Okay, if you think there is, turn the PTO off and get it back. We'll get it looked at by somebody that's been through fluid power society and all certifications. All right. Another thing that kind of just came to my mind as we were going through this, one thing we've heard, and it was actually a different company, but they did a study on the most common incidents on a bucket truck. And to be honest with you, the number one had nothing to do with the bucket. It had to do with getting on and off of the tail shelf. That sounds absolutely ridiculous, but jumping off a tail shelf, scraping our shins off of tail shelves, twisting our ankles, those kind of things. Guys, the new ones come with the side step. The other ones come up from the back. The steps are there. Use the steps on 3 points of contact, forward, off 3 points of contact, back. Okay? Again, nothing crazy that we're asking you to do, but it is one of the most commonly seen incidents. Somebody jumping off, spraining their ankle, somebody catching their shin on a tail shelf, something like that. So, pretty straightforward. Go ahead, Rob.
Before you begin your job, check the condition of all protective clothing and equipment as required by OSHA and your employer. Here are some additional requirements to be included in your safe work practices. When handling material, never attach the load to the fall protection anchor. Never lay conductors on platforms to lift them into position, and do not allow conductor and other objects to drag across the boom, as this may cause gouges in the boom and compromise its strength and durability. The unit can't protect a person from current between an energized conductor and any other conductor, ground, or grounded equipment on or in contact with the pole, including the neutral wire. And remember, mechanical equipment should be operated so that the minimum approach distances of OSHA are maintained from exposed energized lines and equipment. A designated person other than the operator may be required to observe the approach distance to exposed lines and equipment and give timely warnings before the minimum approach distance required by OSHA is reached. OSHA regulations have several specified requirements when operating an aerial device from the platform. They require that only trained persons shall operate the lift, that workers should never belt off to an adjacent pole, structure, or equipment, that workers must always stand firmly on the floor of the platform, never sitting or climbing on the edge of the platform, or using planks, ladders, or other devices for a work position, that workers should never wear climbers while working from the platform. Operating this unit without fully understanding and following the instructions on this video or any other provided training can result in death or serious injury. We know you've heard it many times, but it's true. So if you have any questions about the information you've just seen, your Altec representative will be happy to work with you. The ultimate goal for these guys doesn't happen by chance. It's the product of an innate drive from professionals dedicated to making it happen. Your safety shouldn't be left to chance either. That's why Altec is here. We want to help you operate our equipment properly and make sure you understand all safety procedures that are in place for your well-being. So please take the steps necessary to make safety a habit. It's that full-time effort that separates the professionals from everyone else.
All right, guys, just to close up, take any questions you want, but there was a point made in that last little bit. It's something we see all the time, is standing 2 feet on the bottom of the platform. The platforms, we call it the bucket of platform, is designed to be at a certain height, so if you were to lose your balance, you don't spill out. Okay. Once we put tools in the bottom and start standing on them, or I even saw a contractor in Western Pennsylvania, he actually welded excess steps higher so he could stand on the side and reach over a little bit further. There's pictures out there of guys on taking their ladder with them into the platform, reaching the whole way out and sticking their ladder in and climbing out. That seems really, really, really safe. Please do not do that. They were designed to put 2 feet on the ground. All right? Pretty straightforward. Other than that, that's about all I've got. If you guys have any questions, please ask them. If not, you guys can always get a hold of me. I'm always cruising around Philly here. So anything you guys have, please let us know, and we'll continue to go from there. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. Guys, all the jobs that you are asked to do on a daily basis, the biggest, most important job is being able to make it home to the end of the day. So, hope you guys learned something. If you didn't, and this was a waste of time, it's not a bad way for you to waste a couple hours. The upside to learning something is you guys going home at the end of the day. So I want to thank Mark, Kevin, and Zach for being here and presenting this to us. And they're going to be sticking around hopefully for lunch. So if you guys have any questions for them, please feel free to do that. And thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.